One word from a single human shook the entire Galactic Council. Watch how humanity refused to bow and changed the galaxy forever. The Galactic Council chamber was the largest hall in the galaxy. It was filled with strange light that came from floating crystals hanging high above the seats. The air was heavy with tension as hundreds of alien delegates spoke in low voices and shared their fears. Every species seemed to carry suspicion in their eyes when they spoke about Earth. Humans had arrived on the interstellar stage only recently, yet their actions had already shaken the balance of power. And today, for the first time, the fate of Earth would be decided in this place. The chamber was designed to impress. It was round and tiered like a great arena. Every species had its own platform shaped to match their biology. Some were filled with water, others with heat. Some were floating in magnetic fields to allow those with wings or fins to breathe and move in comfort. At the center was a podium meant for speakers, and this time a human was standing there. Daniel Carter, the chosen representative of Earth. Daniel had short brown hair and sharp eyes that scanned the room without fear. He wore the simple uniform of a diplomat, plain black with the Earth emblem over his chest. While many aliens had arrived in ceremonial robes or armor, he had chosen simplicity. His stillness seemed out of place in a chamber where even silence was restless. Daniel knew what this day meant: humanity's acceptance into the Galactic Council, or humanity's rejection and isolation. Earth was not yet strong enough to stand alone against the galaxy, but he also knew his people would never bow completely. The Council had called this session because many species wanted to block humans from gaining influence. They considered humans dangerous, too violent, too unpredictable. Some feared human ambition, others feared human creativity. Still others feared the sheer resilience that came from surviving on what the galaxy labeled a death world. Daniel stood alone, but he was not afraid. He had grown up on stories of storms that swallowed cities, floods that destroyed coasts, and wars that had nearly ended civilizations, yet humans endured every time. That history now sat in his mind as armor. The whispers grew louder, and the meeting began. The High Speaker, an ancient being with a crystal body that glowed softly, announced that humanity's petition to join the Council would be reviewed. Daniel listened as the accusations started one by one. The reptilian delegate from the Vrokar Empire rose first. His scales shimmered green under the chamber light. He struck the table with his claw, and his voice rumbled like thunder. Humans are reckless, he said. They do not understand restraint. They are born of war. They must never be allowed to expand beyond their own small world. His words were followed by agreement from many seats. Another delegate rose, her body translucent and filled with pulsing veins. She spoke coldly. Humans are emotional, unstable creatures. They cannot be trusted with advanced knowledge. They will bring ruin to others. The chamber filled with sounds of approval. Clicks, screeches, growls. Daniel did not move. He kept his hands folded together and his eyes steady. He had expected every insult, every fear, when a spiny creature with long arms leaned forward and hissed, "Humans are parasites. They thrive only on conflict. They are a disease." The voices grew even harsher. The words spread like fire around the hall. The crowd wanted Earth cast aside. Daniel looked at them and saw not just hostility but fear. It was fear hidden beneath anger. Fear of what humans might become. His fellow human diplomats sitting in the background looked uneasy, their eyes darting from alien to alien. But Daniel kept calm. He had been told to remain patient, to let the storm pass before speaking. His moment would come. He told himself this anger is not new. Earth has seen it before. They call us monsters, but we are survivors, and survivors do not bend. Daniel felt the eyes of 1,000 species pressing against him like a weight, but inside he felt lighter. He remembered the voice of his mother when he was a child, telling him that storms do not last forever, and that silence after the storm is where strength begins. He knew this storm of accusations would pass, and when the silence came, he would speak his truth. But he also knew that his truth might ignite something greater than fear, something that could not be undone. He stood in that light-filled chamber with his heart steady, waiting for the silence to arrive. The voices in the chamber grew louder as more alien leaders stood and shouted their warnings about humanity. Some banged their tables, some flashed their colors or spread their wings in displays of anger. The air was thick with the sound of hatred, And distrust every word thrown at the humans was meant to break their spirit, to make them submit. The High Speaker tried to calm the hall, but the crowd was restless. Daniel Carter stood still at the podium, his face calm, his breathing steady, while, inside, he measured every sound and every pause. He had trained himself for this moment to not show fear, to not show weakness, because weakness would confirm every suspicion thrown at his people. The reptilian delegate hissed again and said, "Humans, think only of themselves. They will consume resources and turn allies into slaves." His words were sharp and filled with poison. The translucent delegate raised a thin hand and said, "Their world is violent and so are they. They cannot understand peace. How can they bring anything but chaos?" The chamber echoed with agreement, yet not all voices were in anger. A small being covered in feathers spoke quietly, almost unheard at first. "Perhaps we should listen to them before we judge." But the soft voice was drowned out by louder roars. Daniel knew that small voice might matter later. He remembered it but did not show it on his face. His fellow diplomats whispered nervously from their seats. They wanted him to speak. They wanted him to defend humanity. Yet Daniel knew that to speak too soon would be to lose. He waited. He let the storm run its course, because storms always tire themselves out. One alien with a massive frame covered in armored plates leaned forward and shouted, "Humans believe in war before peace. They carry weapons even into talks. They cannot be trusted. I say they are denied the right to join us." Another joined in, their eyes glowing with strange light. "Humans are like fire. They spread and consume everything they touch. We cannot let fire into our council." The tension reached a peak. It felt like the chamber itself was shaking from the anger. Daniel's heart beat steady. His fingers tapped lightly against the podium. He thought of Earth. He thought of the children growing up under open skies who knew nothing of this hall. He thought of oceans, storms, mountains, and the stubborn spirit of his people. He was not here to beg. He was here to remind the galaxy that Earth would not vanish under their judgment. Finally, the High Speaker raised both glowing arms and the noise began to fade. It was time. The speaker said, "Humanity may now answer the charges." The entire chamber fell into a strange silence. Thousands of eyes locked on Daniel. He felt their weight pressing against him. But he did not flinch. He rose slowly, his voice calm but strong, carried by the translators across every corner of the hall. He said, "You speak of fear. You speak of chaos and danger, but you do not speak of truth." His words echoed through the crystal wall. Some leaned forward to listen. Others folded their arms in disdain. Daniel continued, "Humans are not born of peace. It is true, we are born of storms, earthquakes, fire, and endless struggle. We did not inherit survival. We fought for it. We are not reckless. We are resilient. We are not parasites. We are survivors." His voice was steady, each word carefully chosen, but carrying the strength of generations of pain and triumph. Some aliens frowned. Others tilted their heads in curiosity. But before Daniel could continue, a tall figure with silver skin interrupted. "Speak one word, then human. One word that will guarantee your loyalty to peace. One word that will bind your people to never rise against the council. One word that can prove you are worthy of standing here." Daniel fell silent. He could feel the entire room holding its breath, waiting for him, waiting for Earth to bend. The silence was sharp. It cut through the chamber, sharper than any shout. Daniel lowered his eyes for a moment, then lifted them again, calm and unshaken. He took a slow breath. The storm around him had ended. This was the silence he had been waiting for, and in that silence he knew his next word would change everything. Daniel looked around the hall and saw the waiting faces of hundreds of alien delegates, every shape, every color, every strange form, and yet every single one leaning forward, as if his next breath would decide the fate of the galaxy. The demand, still, echoed in his ears. "Give us one word, the word that will bind humanity to peace, a word that would prove Earth would never rise against them." But Daniel knew what that really meant. They were not asking for peace. They were asking for submission. They wanted humanity to kneel before the council. They wanted Earth to speak a word of obedience, a word that would chain them forever. Daniel thought of the history of his people, of the long ages of war and hardship of nations that had risen and fallen, of slavery, of oppression, of people who had refused to bend even when all hope was gone. He thought of how every victory humans had ever earned came not from bowing but from standing tall. He thought of the storms of earth, of the predators of the eye, night of the mountains that crushed the weak and forged the strong, and he knew the word they wanted would never come from his lips. The hall was so quiet now that he could hear the faint hum of the floating crystals above and the sound of his own heartbeat. Daniel lifted his head and looked directly at the high speaker. Then he let the silence stretch 1 second, 2, 3, until the entire chamber seemed to lean toward him. Then he spoke a single word. No. The translators echoed it across the hall in every language. No, no, no. The sound carried like a wave, and then came the eruption. The council chamber exploded in noise. Alien voices clashed in rage and disbelief. Some shouted in anger, some screamed in shock. Others roared with fury. How dare a human refuse? How dare a newcomer defy the will of the galaxy? Wings spread, claws slammed against stone tables, tentacles lashed against the floor, and the storm that followed was louder than anything before. Yet Daniel stood firm, unmoving, his face calm, his eyes clear. He let them shout. He let them rage because he knew that one word had already broken their illusion of control. After a long moment, he raised his hand and his voice cut through the noise carried by the translators. No means we will not bow to threats. No means we will not chain ourselves so you can feel safe. No means we will not let fear write our future. The noise lessened slowly, his voice stronger than the storm around him. No does not mean war. No means we decide for ourselves. You call us reckless, you call us dangerous, but the truth is that you fear us because we do not kneel. We have never kneeled. Not to our world, not to our storms, not to our rulers, and we will not kneel to you. The silence that followed was different this time. It was not sharp with anticipation, it was heavy with shock. The delegates looked at him, some with fury, some with disbelief, but others with something else. Respect, unease, curiosity. Daniel knew he had shattered the moment. He had broken the game the council had played for centuries. Never before had a newcomer spoken this way. Never before had one word carried so much weight. The high speaker's crystal body flickered uncertain for the first time in memory. Daniel lowered his hand, his heart still steady. He had spoken the truth of humanity in one word, and the galaxy would never forget it. The uproar did not end quickly. It rolled through the council chamber like a storm that refused to pass. Delegates shouted over one another. Their translators, straining to keep up, the reptilian leader slammed his claw against the table again, his eyes blazing with fury. "This is madness," he roared. "This species is dangerous. They spit in the face of unity. They should be exiled at once." Another delegate with glowing tendrils that flickered like fire screamed, "Humanity has declared itself an enemy. With that word they must be punished before they spread their chaos." Still others joined in, wings beating against the air, tails lashing floors, trembling under armored limbs. But through all of it, Daniel Carter stood motionless. He let them rage. He let them throw their anger against the walls until the chamber itself shook. Then he raised his voice again and the storm faltered. He said, "You think no means violence, but it does not. No means we will not let fear govern us. No means we will not be bound by your chains. No means we are free, and freedom is not a threat unless you fear it." His voice was carried across the chamber, strong, clear, cutting through the roars, and slowly the noise began to die. Some continued to shout, but others grew quiet, listening to the strange courage in his tone. Daniel stepped forward from the podium, his eyes moving from delegate to delegate. Some looked at him with hate, but others now avoided his gaze, unsettled. "You say we are reckless," he continued, "but we are only what our world made us: storms, fire, predators, famine. Yet we endured, we built, we created, not because it was safe, but because it was never safe. That is who we are." He paused and let the silence return his words, hanging in the charged air. One delegate with feathers of gold finally spoke, their voice trembling. "Perhaps we mistake them. Perhaps their refusal is not weakness, but strength. Perhaps it is something we should understand." This voice caused murmurs across the chamber. The alliances that seemed unshakable now cracked. Some delegates turned toward one another, whispering. Daniel saw it and knew the balance was shifting, not in his favor, not against him, but into something new, something unsettled. His one word had not only defied them, it had divided them. He stood taller now, his voice calm again. We do not come here to conquer. We do not come here to beg. We come here to stand as equals. And if you will not have us as equals, then we will stand alone. But know this, we will never kneel. The silence was deep now, heavier than before, and every delegate felt the weight of it. Daniel's eyes remained steady. He knew the council would never forget what he had said. He had broken their order with a single word, and now the galaxy itself was uncertain, trembling before what humanity might become. The debate stretched on like an endless night. The chamber still shook with the echoes of Daniel's word, and the delegates could not settle themselves. Some demanded Earth be sanctioned, their voices full of venom and fear. One of the plated giants slammed his armored fist down so hard the platform cracked beneath him. He shouted, "Humanity has spat on the council. They must be isolated. Their ships denied their colonies." Stripped, another delegate with shimmering scales leaned forward. Their eyes, flashing, they have chosen defiance. They have chosen war even if they do not admit it. If they remain unchecked, their fire will consume all of us. But then other voices rose, quieter at first, but slowly louder. Feathered diplomats spoke with careful tone, their wings folded close. Perhaps their refusal proves what we lack. They do not kneel because they have lived without safety. They have known survival, where most of us would have perished. The chamber wavered, torn between fury and reluctant admiration. Daniel stood listening, letting the storm of argument swirl around him. He did not need to shout anymore. His word had already been spoken, and it lived in the minds of everyone present. Some aliens glared at him with hatred, yet others studied him as if seeing a creature they had never understood before. Daniel finally stepped forward again, and the chamber hushed, not by command but by the strange gravity his voice carried. He said, "You call us reckless, but you fear our refusal, only because you have forgotten what it means to fight for survival. You were born into safety, into worlds shaped by technology and order. We were not. We were born into storms, earthquakes, fire, predators. We have been slaves. We have been victims, but we will never be again." He let the words rest over them like a heavy stone. The silence that followed was broken by whispers, whispers that spread from one platform to the next. Alliances shifting in real time, walls of unity, crumbling under the weight of a single truth. The high speaker flickered their crystal light, uncertain for the first time in memory. The chamber no longer spoke with one voice. It was split, fractured. Some called for Earth's exile, others for its inclusion, not because of love, but because of respect or perhaps fear. Daniel could see it in their eyes. The council was no longer whole, and he knew then that his defiance had broken something far greater than just their patience. It had broken the illusion of their control, and the galaxy would never be the same again. By the time the session ended, the chamber felt nothing like it had at the start. It was no longer a hall of unity, but a hall of cracks and whispers. Daniel Carter stood at the center, watching the delegates leave. Some stormed out with fury, their voices still echoing about sanctions and punishment. Others walked in silence, their eyes fixed on him with a mix of fear and unwilling respect. And a few lingered long enough to bow their heads slightly, as if acknowledging that they had seen something. They could not deny the high speaker gave no verdict. They simply dismissed the council, their crystal body dim as though the light inside them was uncertain. For the first time in ages, the meeting was over, but its echo would travel across the stars. Daniel stepped down from the podium, his footsteps steady on the shining floor. He felt the eyes of every guard, every attendant, every scribe following him, as though they knew a moment of history had just been written. Yet he did not smile, and he did not celebrate. He walked quietly with his hands folded behind his back, his mind heavy but clear. One word had changed everything outside the chamber. The human diplomats rushed to meet him, their faces pale, their voices trembling. Some asked, "Why did you do that? Why did you not give them the word they wanted?" Daniel looked at them calmly and answered, "Because if we gave them the word they asked for, we would not be human anymore." They did not fully understand him, but his voice carried a weight. That silenced their questions. When the news spread, it ran faster than light across the galaxy. On every world, in every station, in every colony, people whispered of the human who stood before the council and spoke only one word: No, to some it was. A curse, to others a challenge. But to many it was a story that stirred something long forgotten: courage, pride, defiance on distant planets. Children asked their parents, who are the humans, and the parents answered, they are the ones who said no. The story became legend before the week had passed. Alien rulers argued in private about what humanity might do next. Some wanted to crush them quickly, others wanted them as allies, because a race that could shatter the council with a single word might, one day, be the only ally worth having. Daniel returned to Earth in silence when he arrived. His people asked him what had happened, what he had said. He told them plainly. Sometimes one word is enough to change the galaxy, and his people understood, because Earth had always known that one word spoken with courage could carry more weight than an army. In that moment, humanity was no longer a newcomer. They were no longer begging for a seat. They were something greater, a storm on the horizon, a fire in the dark, and every species in the galaxy now knew one truth. Humans would never kneel. By the time the session ended, the chamber felt like a storm had passed, but its traces remained everywhere. The air was heavy with tension, whispers, and lingering fear. Daniel Carter stood quietly at the center, watching hundreds of delegates leave. Some stormed out with fury, their voices still echoing demands for sanctions and punishment. Others walked in silence, their eyes fixed on him with a mix of awe, fear, and reluctant respect. A few lingered longer, bowing slightly or nodding, acknowledging that humanity had shown them something they could not ignore. The High Speaker's crystal body dimmed in the fading light, their glow uncertain for the first time in memory. No verdict was declared, no decisions made. The council had been shaken, its illusion of control broken. Daniel stepped down from the podium, his footsteps firm but calm. He could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on him, guards, scribes, attendants, but he did not flinch. He had come here to speak the truth, and now the truth had spread across the galaxy. Outside the chamber, the human diplomats gathered around him, their faces pale, their voices trembling. "Daniel, what did you just do?" One whispered. "Why did you refuse to give them the word they wanted?" Others stared, wide-eyed, as if afraid to believe what had just happened. Daniel turned to them, his eyes calm and steady. "Because if we gave them that word," he said softly, "we would no longer be human. We would be something else, something they could control." Humanity does not kneel. Humanity never has. The word spread like wildfire. By the time Daniel returned to Earth, every alien world with a communication network had heard of it. Across the stars, from the icy colonies of the Frostian Belt to the molten cities of Paraxis Prime, whispers of the human who said no echoed. Some species called it madness, some called it courage, and others simply said the same word back to themselves in disbelief. Governments that had dismissed humanity as weak or naive now reconsidered. Military councils debated strategies, asking whether this human species should be feared or courted. Traders and explorers speculated about the unpredictability of a race that could defy an entire galactic body with a single word. Even historians took notice, comparing humanity to the greatest civilizations in galactic memory, not for their technology or wealth, but for their unyielding spirit. Back on Earth, Daniel was met with questions, praise, and confusion. People crowded around him in airports, council chambers, and streets. "What happened?" they asked. "What did you say?" He answered simply, "Sometimes one word is enough to change the galaxy." And his people understood. They knew that Earth had always survived storms, wars, and catastrophes because humanity refused to bow, refused to surrender, refused to believe that fear could control them. Days turned into weeks, and the story of the council began to spread further. Children listened to it in schools, adults repeated it in discussions, and storytellers made legends of it. Alien news networks ran special programs dissecting the events, debating what it meant for the future. The council itself remained silent officially, but the fractures were clear. Delegates who had opposed humanity openly now whispered in private meetings, some urging caution, others seeking alliances. Daniel, however, did not allow himself to be distracted by fame or recognition. He returned to his work quietly, meeting with scientists, strategists, and other diplomats. He knew this moment was only the beginning. Humanity had shown its strength, but the galaxy was vast and full of dangers. The lesson of the one word was clear. Courage and clarity could shake empires, but preparation and unity would keep Earth safe. In the months that followed, Earth's influence began to grow, not through weapons or armies, but through respect and cautious alliances. Other species previously dismissive now sought cooperation, treaties, and trade agreements. Some feared humanity's potential while others admired it. Every contact, every negotiation carried the shadow of that single word. There were challenges, of course. Some factions still sought to isolate Earth, launching secret missions and trying to sabotage trade routes. Pirates and rogue species tested humanity's limits, yet each time humans stood firm, their actions echoing the defiance Daniel had shown in the Council. They did not panic. They adapted. They survived. And every victory, no matter how small, reinforced the lesson that one word had taught the galaxy. Humanity would not kneel. Humanity would not be controlled, and humanity's spirit was unbreakable. Years later, when Daniel looked back on that day, he understood fully what he had done. It was not the word itself that had changed the galaxy. It was the courage behind it, the willingness to face impossible odds and speak truth without fear. That courage became a beacon for humans and aliens alike, a reminder that freedom was worth defending, even against the most powerful bodies in the universe. The legend of that day grew over time. Across the stars, the story of the human who said no became a symbol. In quiet corners of alien cities, parents whispered it to their children. In council chambers, officials debated it in hushed tones. Humanity, once underestimated, had made a mark that no one could erase. And all of it began with a single word, spoken calmly, boldly, and with unwavering truth. Daniel finally allowed himself a small smile as he watched the next generation of diplomats and explorers train, inspired by what had happened. They were not yet warriors, not yet rulers, but they carried the same spirit. They carried the knowledge that courage could shake empires and that truth, even in a single word, could change history. And so the galaxy learned a lesson it would never forget. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Humanity was not to be controlled. Humanity, as long as it existed, would speak truth without fear, and when that truth came, the universe would tremble, not because of violence, but because of the spirit that no one, no matter how powerful, could ever break. That was the lasting power of the word no. It had shattered expectations, altered alliances, and set humanity on a path that could never be undone. It became a warning, a promise, and a legend all at once. For every corner of the galaxy, the story was clear. Humans would not kneel, and the galaxy would never forget it.